Our next inspiring speaker has a name as unique as her impact. Her first name is the only one in the world with its spelling. Formerly a practicing psychotherapist, empowering powerful humans to live more healed than wounded, she now mentors female founders to thrive in entrepreneurship, earning her the title of the Latina Oprah for helping women reach the top 1% in business. Beyond her love of floral arrangements, vegan tacos, and romantic strolls down the makeup aisle, Zeahlot is an international speaker transforming lives with her words, one talk at a time. Let's give an outstanding welcome to our speaker, Zeahlot.
Hello, ladies. Before we start today, I'd like to take a moment of gratitude, of deep, deep gratitude, and to thank Kristen, Elizabeth, and all the women of Momentum. I feel this is beyond special, more so because we are women in a new time, and so may we stay wild. It is my 27th birthday, and I have tears running down my eyes. Ladies, the type of tears that the mascara you paid $15, $20 for, you're thinking about twice. My mother is telling me my birth story, my origin story, the one I never heard. Changed my life, and I'm going to tell you about it today and why it matters. Picture it. It's 1986, it's December, it's Christmas time. Little me in the belly. My mom, Southern California, immigrant, undocumented, my dad too. She goes to the doctor, 3 months pregnant, right? She's gonna have me. And they tell her that I'm gonna have Down syndrome. And that as a woman that's undocumented in the United States, she should 100% abort me like right now. Because she's not gonna have the resources she needs, nor does she know what to do with a special needs child. Devastated, she goes home. She talks about it with my father, and both my parents, being of deep faith, they prayed about it, and they decided to keep me. And in June of 1987, I was born. I don't have Down syndrome. Why does this matter? Because it changed my life. At that very moment, at 27, I realized I had purpose. I realized that I had been chosen. I realized that I had been favored. And every single one of you in this room as women have already been chosen. You have so much greatness inside you. It is undoubtedly the most important power you will ever have as a woman. Why do I share this with you today? Because if you know that magic inside you, ain't nobody gonna take it from you. Ain't nobody gonna drag you when you own your own story. And so today, ladies, we're gonna learn about leading yourself first. And hence the title, right? She who leads herself. And so many women have trailblazed and told us, well, this is how we lead. And this is what we do. We put our cowgirl boots on, right? And this is how we lead. And here's the thing, I don't think any of it is wrong or right. But here is what I've learned. If I cannot lead myself, how can I do it for others? So this is the message we're gonna hear today. All right, so let me take you on a journey. And ladies, I have a special little story for you. My partner and I, we were at the airport, very excited, boots on, ready to go with our coats. And there I am eating my eggs. And the lady next to me, she goes, "You look like you're going somewhere." And I go, "You look like you're from Jackson Hole." Shocked, she's like, I am. And she goes, "How'd you know that?" I go, "Because your jacket says Jackson Hole Airport." And so we get into this beautiful conversation, right? We chit chat, we make friends. And then I ask her, and I said, "I have a very, very important question." She goes, "All right." I go, "How would you describe Jackson Hole in one word?" She pauses, she puts her fork down. And this is a woman of substance, all right? This is a woman that wears pearls by Sherry, okay? Yes. I love that you knew exactly what I was talking about. She says, wild. So today, ladies, we're going to stay wild, and I'm going to take you on that journey. All right? Get ready. What are we doing here, ladies? We're creating movements. And the most important thing I've ever learned in my life, forget the branding, forget the marketing, forget everything I ever learned in school. It's what I learned in life that actually really makes that difference. Guess what I learned? Let's look up on the screen. When women elevate, they change the world. That in itself is a movement. That is what you are a part of. And so anything that you learn today and you take with you, may you inspire and move another woman in that. Because that is why we're here. So that you know we have purpose, we have meaning, all right? So now I'm going to tell you about my movement and what has caused that. And so now, after I learned exactly how I came to be and the purpose I had in life, then at 33 years later, I had to ask myself deeper questions. Well, I know where I'm going, but do I know where I came from? And so I started to ask deeper questions. I practiced psychotherapy for 10 years. Those are different stories. Lots of very beautiful, valuable stories. But one of the most important conversations I ever had with another human being in a sacred space is, hey, if your house was on fire, what would you run out with? What would you grab and be like, no, this needs to stay with me? This is it for me. This is it. And before I show you the delicacy of it, I want to tell you the power that women hold, so when I tell you a little bit about the women in my life, you know. Women's power is held in our truth, our authenticity, who we are, and most importantly, our identity. It is the number one thing that will ever stand out as a woman for you, because how you show up is exactly who you are. It's not what you say you're going to do. It's not what you think you'll do on Monday at 3 o'clock. It's exactly who you are right now in this moment. Your being. That is the transformational moment for you to actually embrace. If my house was burning down, this is what I would grab. When we talk about generational legacy and generational wealth, this is part of my treasure. These photos, ladies, are over a century old. Some of these are from the 1800s. When I was gifted these photos, I was brought to tears. And I was like, what? Like, what's going on here? And so my first language is Spanish. And my father sat down with me and was like, come here, mija, come here. He brought his coffee. I'm like, ooh, this is about to be a conversation. And so what you're looking at here is some of the greatest treasures I have. These are my great-great-grandmothers. They were wild women in their own ways. Wild in a different way. Wild in that my great-grandmother, Valentina, had about 18 children. Some living and some didn't make it. That's wild. My great-grandmother, on this side here, some of her children she didn't even get to keep because she was passed around from man to man, not by choice, because it was survival. If one died, she had to go to the next because she had children to feed. She was never given the opportunity to develop her gifts like many of us in this room. And that's what moved me, hearing these stories. And some of them my father's telling me and said, my mom told me. She actually couldn't really tell me in front of my father. It was that sacred. And this one over here, this one's extremely powerful. This one's my mother's lineage. So these two are my father's, but on this side, my great-great-grandmother, Verdina. This one changed my life. Ladies, raise your hand if you know how valuable it is to feel safe in an environment and to feel safe in your body. That's right, that's power. She didn't. Her husband died, and so she moved into her sister's home with the husband. And the husband actually took advantage, and from that my grandfather was born. And that's the lineage I have in my mother. But this is the most powerful thing I have because she continued with her child here. That's my grandfather that she's holding. Yeah. And these are the stories that we hear. And I'm so curious to know over time, what are the stories I didn't hear? What are the power these women had? What is the voice that I didn't hear? How could I hear them? They're part of my DNA, they're part of my genes. And I encourage each and every one of you women in the room to ask yourself, what are the stories I haven't heard yet in my lineage, in my bloodline? What courage do we have? What strength? Down we go the lineage, great grandmothers. I look mostly like my grandmother, Paola. She's on my dad's side. She died giving birth. She died giving birth to her 4th child. I haven't had children yet, but many of you in this room are mothers. And I can't imagine the sacrifice you make in your mind, your body, and your soul to carry a child to life. And so she died in childbirth for me to know that it is indeed a gift. That also changed me. My 2 other grandmothers on the other side, well, they were wild women. They would write in secret. Because here's the thing. All my lineage comes from Mexico, but this story might sound familiar. What women are allowed and not allowed to do. Stay sweet. Stay kind. But don't you say exactly what it is that your power is or what you know that's going to change the world. Stay sweet. This is the message all these women received. And so in secret, they would write. Sometimes it wasn't even proper what they were writing. It was just sounding it out, but they did it. They had that courage. And so these are all the stories that I'm receiving from my mother and my father, and I'm just blown away. And something inside me internally shifted. I said, what is that? And my power was growing inside me. And so the stories continued. This is right here, my grandmother's. This is Mama's mama, and this is Daddy's mom. This is my grandmother, Dominga. Beautiful woman, absolutely stunning. Now, she was actually wild. She definitely belongs in Wyoming. Now, this woman gave birth to my mother, but she was wild because even though she was told, stay sweet and stay quiet, she didn't. She was the first woman that said, I can make $1 out of a dime, and I'm gonna die trying. She was the first one in the lineage that tried entrepreneurship from her home. So she opened up a little store. She started to get a little bit of money. And from that, that's what she bought the children, the extras, that the man in the house said, well, I don't know if we have something for them. She took her power back, yeah? And it's a different story with my father's mother. My abuelita Juliana, I had the opportunity of spending time with her. Over the summers, I would go to Mexico, get to know her a bit better. But I had the most important lesson when I spoke to her. She had 15 children. And I said, 15? I thought there was 12, because there were so many aunts and uncles. And many of you might come from large families or small ones. But let me tell you, when you start to learn about family, it gets a little wild there too. And so I said, what happened to the other 3? She goes, well, my first babies, the first 3 died. I said, is that right? And so she did something. She goes, we're going to go on a walk, but you can't tell anybody else. And I said, okay. And so we went on a walk, and we went to the family cemetery. And there she told me, she's like, here's where my babies are buried. She goes, there was only one girl. She goes, her name was Margarita. She goes, but I know she had so much power within her. Because every single day when I was pregnant, I wore white. And I know that baby was going to be light in this world. And that's when I knew the power of intention. My grandmother wore white every single day she was pregnant with that little girl. And that showed me the power these women had to change, although their circumstance may not have given them everything that they needed in that time. And so from these stories, I learned it's not so much the resources, but the resourcefulness of a woman. Now this woman, this is my mama. This is a photo shoot we did actually for her 60th birthday, and this is in our traditional dressing as Mexican women. I'm wearing my father's state traditional, And my mother from Veracruz is wearing the white that holds up like this, and then La Bamba starts. You start dancing around. My mother's had a very difficult life, extremely difficult life. And she taught me a lot about courage. And if anybody in here is fans of my clinical sister, Brene Brown, hands up. That woman is fantastic, and she's shown us about vulnerability and courage. And here's what my mother taught me. She taught me that if you have something to say, you better say it. Because it's exactly the channel that God has chosen you to be, with that message, with that gift, with that pearl of wisdom that you can add to your pearl necklace. My mother may not have given me a set of pearls, but she definitely gave me wisdom through that courage. My mother in her life, I actually happened to be her second child. And this is something very intimate and vulnerable that I'm going to share with the ladies in this room so you can understand a bit more of this story and the power it holds. I was the first living being in my mother's body before she decided that she was going to no longer continue with a pregnancy. And that was 3 times. And so for her and my father to decide to keep me, that was huge, because I was the first for them both. I was my father's first child, my mother's second. And so that courage my mother had to take that leap of faith and to have me also taught me faith. Let's talk about courage. Let's talk about it. Courage means something different to every single woman in this room. But let me tell you a little something. Even showing up today is courage. Not so long ago, ladies, doing what we're doing exactly in this room was an absolute no-no. You cannot gather, you cannot think collectively, and no, you cannot whisper to your sister about the dreams and hopes that you have. In some parts of the world, it's still like that. Heck, I visited some that I'm like, did I walk into a twilight zone? But that's because I've had the opportunity and the blessing of knowing different. Courage is knowing that you have something to gift to the world, and you're going to do everything you can benevolently to make that happen. And so I started off on my own journey, and what did that look like? Well, here's my belief. There are 3 things that will grow the heck out of you: relationships, business, and meditation, which equals a relationship with yourself. So I'm going to take you on my journey of entrepreneurship. Ooh, picture it. It's 2020. It's COVID. I'm a practicing psychotherapist. I'm seeing patients day in and day out. Let me tell you, if those walls could talk, I'd got story for days, okay? 4 days. Some days I would cry, some days I would laugh, and some days I would just ask myself, what is this teaching me? Found a very, very important lesson. Most people think that when they choose their career, right, their path, that they're doing it because they want to give back. That's very true. But the reality is it gives to us. It ends up being the blessing that we give ourselves through other individuals that we connect with, and that's exactly what happened. And so I had a shower thought. I had $1 million idea, and I didn't even know it. What if I could impact the world at a level that was unmatched? But how could I do that? How could I multiply something? For me, I've never been good at the math isn't mathin'. That's just not my jam. Humans, connections, conversation is my gift. And so I had this idea, what if I helped other healers understand their gift to multiply it as well? And that's what opened up my entrepreneurial journey to an extent that actually scaled and grew me tremendously. Why do I share this? Because in entrepreneurship, you will face yourself to the deepest level you will ever meet yourself, in the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's a lot like marriage. In sickness and in health, till death do us part. So let me tell you about what that looks like for me and how it showed up. Okay, so my CFO is actually here. And he's probably like, OMG, what are you doing? What are you doing showing this? Well, let me tell you a little bit about courage. And when you mix that with entrepreneurship, starting, growing, or scaling a business, what that gives you. So you're wondering, what are we looking at here? Well, on the left, this is an example of what most people would think gives someone faith in entrepreneurship, right? When the good gets going. As a psychotherapist, in the best year working for someone else, I didn't do too much in a year. And in 1 month in entrepreneurship, in my first month, I actually made what I made in a year. Blew my mind. I was like, where did this come from? And at first I thought, could that be success? Is that it? Like, is that what it looks like? I wasn't sure. God had a lesson for me. God tested me. Here's what happened. On the right, here's what I was left with. A couple of years into entrepreneurship. That's my personal bank account. Yes, I bank with Wells Fargo. That is my personal bank account. At least I had an angel number, 55. Yeah. And when I looked at that, I had to remind myself of the most important lesson for courage. Whether I was looking at that for the month or this for the month, I still had to have faith over fear. Because a lot of people think that courage is going to be the strongest felt and held when you're doing really well and things are just looking up and things are just going and going and going until one day they don't. And in these moments, the moments where I literally had $55 left to my name, I had to still remember the woman I am with the purpose I have and all the women before me that are looking to see what I do with all the gifts they have given me, all the lessons, all the pearls of wisdom. Many of you have had challenges and tribulations in this room. Many of you have done it quietly. Many of you have probably done it gracefully. Cried yourself to sleep, wipe your tears, and in the morning you put on that red lipstick and you go. That right there is faith. That is faith, and in so many different ways. Whether you have a form of religion or not, it's having that faith in yourself. Yeah. And so let's look at this formula, right? Because I figured it out. What if I could teach other people in their own way to adapt it and figure out what pieces they can put together to bring their own formula together? And so here's what I came up with. If you have courage and you put yourself where you're going to grow the most very uncomfortably, such as perhaps entrepreneurship, what do you get? You get leadership. The most beautiful part about this is that it's inner sourced. It's your own leadership. Check this out. In our history, we have seen the greatest leaders come to be in the face of adversity, in the troubling times. In the toughest of times, we learn who is a leader. You will not know who you really are as a woman until you've had that moment where you're like, oh, am I really who I say I am? That's when you find out who you are. And so if you'd like to take this formula today and plug your own experiences in to find out about your own leadership style, how you show up in leadership even when you are tested, that's when you'll have your own definition. And so once I had this formula, the next step came to be. And I was like, what could be missing? What could be missing? And then, sure as much, God says, I have your next puzzle piece. And I said, yes, until it happened. So picture it, ladies. It's 2016. My mama and I are in Miami, okay? We're ready to mingle, okay? We're ready to go out into the sun and have fun. Until we had a tiffle in the hotel room. Anybody ever have a fight with their mom? Oh, yeah. Yeah, could go on for hours and hours. So we're huffing and puffing, we're going at it, and the most beautiful thing happened. We're yelling at each other. I sit on one side of the bed, she sits on the other, and I say to my mom, I go, Mom, like, what are we doing here? She goes, I was thinking just the same thing, and she screams at me, and she says, what do you want from me? What do you want? So frustrated, right? And out of my heart, it was like channeled. It was literally like I received a download from source. And I said to my mom, and it was the funniest thing, I said, I want you to die. And everybody's thinking like, oh my gosh, is she a bratty 16-year-old? I want you to die more healed than wounded. Mom, I want you to die more healed than wounded. She just cried. She paused. My loud, tigress mother paused. And then I said it in Spanish, just in case. She's like, okay. ¿Quieres que me muera? ¿Más sana? I was like, yes, I want you to die more healed than wounded. And that was it. That was the best vacation I've ever had with her till this day. After that, smooth sailing, because she understood something. The story she told me years ago when I was 27 gave me purpose. And now I understood the purpose I had in this world. And that's when I discovered my mission as a woman, to die more healed and wounded, and to help other powerful human beings have the same opportunity. That's how my mother gave me purpose and helped me understand my mission. And so it always came from a woman. If I could thank her for anything, it would be that. And so that leads me to something, right? Because now I have a mission. It's like, all right, well now, what do we do with that? How do we help others come to the same conclusion? How do we heal? How do we do this thing called healing? And so that takes me to the next chapter of my life. Ladies, it's called the business of healing. Ironically, I chose to be a healer. I chose to be a psychotherapist, holding space for people in the room. I thought to myself, well, here's the formula for healing. It's this thing called this DSM, and on this chapter and this chapter. I was deadly wrong. Anything that book taught me was absolutely wonderful and a resource only. But the most important thing I found about healing is who you learn to be in that grief and in that process. And so, luck will have it that life taught me the next lesson. It was the most painful, soul-crushing experience that I have ever had in my entire life till this day. And I've always asked myself, why does this happen? And then that's when the shift happened, ladies. I had to ask myself, is life happening to me or for me? That's the difference. A lot of people will say it, but it's another when it's actually happening in that moment. And so here's what happened. This is my dad. In August of 2021, I lost my father to leukemia. I lost him in 90 days. In 90 days, 3 months. May 5th, he ends up in the hospital, and he's this Hispanic, Latino, Mexican father. He's never sick. He's never sick. He's always fixing something, and he's always outside. That's my dad. Great guy. And so for me to lose him in 90 days, it was as if a truck had hit me. It was during COVID. City of Hope in Los Angeles, California, they had a rule. Because it was COVID, only one person could be in the room at a time. And you had to be COVID tested, in and out, in and out. And if you left the hospital, you couldn't come back because the line to get tested was weeks long. And so my sister and I made a pact. And if any of you have ever lost a loved one in this room, may you always remember that the only thing you will ever have is the words you share with them, the memories you have. So why do I share this? Because higher source knew that I still had to learn important lessons about pain. There's a difference between pain and suffering, and for the longest time I didn't understand the difference. And what does this all have to do with healing? There's a huge difference. Pain is over here, and that's part of the human condition. You all signed it, you all signed on the dotted line and you agreed. Hi, I'm human, I'm going to experience pain. What we didn't sign up for is suffering. What's the difference? One is optional. Suffering is optional. Pain, sorry, you gotta experience it as a human. Through pain, we heal. And so this is one of the only photos I have left with my dad before he passed. As you could see, it's COVID. And I had one of the deepest conversations I've ever had in my life with him. Conversation that was messy and ugly, and a lot of people would think, well, why wouldn't you just have a very nice, peaceful, right, kumbaya moment with your father? I had those too. But if it wasn't for that very painful, truthful conversation, I wouldn't have been able to heal. In the mess and in those conversations that you don't want to have and that you're avoiding, and you're like, oh, tomorrow. Don't wait. Have those. Because through those waters, you will learn exactly who you are. And so something extraordinary happened. My mindset actually shifted. It shifted so much that I actually became a new woman. It was ugly, it was unexpected, and it was turbulent. At the time when my father became sick, I was running 2 companies, my private practice that I was seeing patients, and then also my practice where I was growing and helping clinicians run private practices. Let me tell you, I learned some lessons. I hired the wrong people because I was coming from a place of pain. I was dating the wrong men that had not good intentions. I was attracting people that also had pain until I became conscious of it. And so one of the things that was very extraordinary is that we did not have a funeral, my mother's choice. My mother's first husband actually died in the service and military. And so my mother had an aversion to pain. And so she didn't want to have a funeral. And so I had to ask myself, how will I heal? How will I lead myself through this transition? No one in my family, my sisters, were not gathering. We're not collectively healing. We're not talking about this. Nobody in my family knows what to do with their feelings. They're allergic to them. And I'm over here just feeling extra, feeling all the feels. And so that's when my DNA, my ancestors are talking to me like, okay, and here's exactly what happens. And so I'm in meditation and I'm like, please help me understand this. What is happening? And I got the funniest message. And it said, girlfriend, you're it. Tag, you're it. You got chosen. None of us got to do it, so you're going to do the work for us. Yep. But guess what? If you get through this, you get to lead a lot of women. And I was like, yeah? And they're like, And you get to lead a lineage to healing. That is my gift. They say that when you heal 7 backwards and 7 forwards. That's a lot of generations if you think about it, right? So to my unborn daughter, this is why I do it. To my great-great-great-great-grandmothers that had courage and quietly and stayed sweet, this is why I do it. And so here's what I did. This is my father's sister, Nieves, and that's his brother. That's me right behind her and a cousin. I cried bitter tears and I begged my sisters and my mother, and I said, if there's anything you will give me after my father's passing, may I have his ashes? Please, can I have his ashes? He was cremated. And they gave me that. And so I took him to his resting place, to what would have been his birthday. I had to wait 6 months. And so when I did that, everything kind of just opened up for me. All kinds of ideas, all kinds of visions. And here's the thing I will tell you, ladies, and here's coming from the bottom of my heart, and any woman in here that already has pearls of wisdom will know this. Anything that's of value does not come easy because it tests you. It asks you to be the woman that you actually are in the face of adversity and of challenges. Okay? So here's what I had to ask myself. How will I heal this? Here's what I did. Alternative, but here's what I did. For the past 10 years prior to this happening, I had been practicing for the marathon. I had been practicing. What does that mean? I'd been going to therapy. There was months that I went with my mom that I spent probably about 5 figures just trying to heal because it was a family session, individual session, and just a session to process all of that. But I did the work. Then there was the Reiki. Then there was the sound healing. Then there was the sound baths. I've done over 100 different types of healing, but I did it. I had the courage to show up for myself and say, even if this is painful, I'm going to do it. I share this with all of you because you have the power to heal yourself. Other individuals are only here to mirror that for you and facilitate. I truly believe that inside every single woman, there is a healer. She heals in different ways. We all know her. There's a woman that comes up and says, honey, do you have this in your home? Do you have this for a tea? Right? We have that woman. We have the other one that says a prayer for you and says, may I bless you before you go? Bring the blessings. Bring it, baby. Let's bless me. Then we have the other woman that has that voice and she has that courage. And then she gets into government. She gets into politics and she speaks. That voice is healing. And so when I meet those women, I am so blessed. So interesting. Here's what I learned through this process of healing here. This is the most painful one. You have to feel it to heal it. You have to actually feel it. I did every single thing from the moon to the stars not to feel it. I overworked. Yeah, I watched TV shows. I watched Netflix. I did every single thing I could to avoid until I started to face myself. And then I learned that really important lesson that I'm sharing with you all, because this is how you transform from within. In the pain, that's exactly where you learn what you need to. And so I had a very important lesson that I'm going to share with you all. When my father died 6 months later, I decided to sell 80% of everything I owned, things I loved. I learned to let go. I learned to surrender through minimalism. I decided to get out of my comfort zone, and then I was going to move to Mexico. Everybody I talked to was like, that's crazy. And I'm like, perfect, right? I'm going to travel alone as a woman of color. And I have absolutely diddly idea of how I'm going to make this happen. But I have faith in God, and I have faith in myself. Remember the faith part, that this is going to work out. And it did. And so I kept asking. And so in Bali, in Indonesia, I had been there already 3 months, healing, doing the work with the locals, asking women, what do you do to heal? What does death mean to you? I went on my own adventure to ask myself, what does this mean, so I can help other people understand it as well. And so I went to breakfast, and in the napkin, it had a piece of paper. And I was like, oh, what is this? And so I stuck it in my bra here, as all women do. This is where we put the good stuff. I open up the napkin, and it has the most precious lesson for me. It wasn't a pearl of wisdom. It was a whole jewelry store. Here's exactly what the napkin said, the piece of paper in there. I kept asking God, what is this teaching me? What is the pain teaching me? And I got my answer. It said, pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. This changed me. It was understanding. That was the gift. That was the gift, understanding what does this mean. If I thought I understood spirituality through one book or another podcast, that wasn't anything. Going through this was the biggest change I had to transform me. And so then I had a new dilemma. And the dilemma was, who am I after this grief? Who do I become? Because you do have to grieve, ladies, to become that new woman. You have to grieve the friends that no longer serve you. You have to grieve the partners that no longer fit that puzzle piece. You have to grieve the version of you that isn't serving you anymore. That's the hardest part. We have to say goodbye to her and say hello to the new woman. Yeah. So aside from feeling it to heal it, I had to ask myself even deeper questions here in the puzzle. And it's, what would the healed version of me do in this now situation? That's such a difficult question, because it helps us rise to the occasion and say, I'm not going to be petty anymore. I'm not going to choose not to show up. I'm not going to choose peace over truths. It's one of the hardest things we can look at. And so I would like to ask you, just for a brief moment, to ask yourself, what would the healed version of you do? Would it write that book, right? To inspire and encourage other human beings to rise to the occasion? Would you have that another baby? Yeah. Would you quit that job? Would you ask that person at the library or the coffee shop and say, hey, I've been eyeing you for a minute. Do you eye me back? Yeah. What would you have the courage to do if you knew that you had healing inside you, as you always do? So, leads us to the next situation. So out of the things that grow us as humans, what's the other puzzle piece? Relationships. Okay. Raise your hand if you're in a relationship. Everyone in here should be raising their hand. The most important relationship you will ever have is with yourself. That was such a hard lesson for me to learn. Such a hard lesson. And how does this come into play into being the leader of our life, becoming the woman that others follow, right? I remember learning that in order for us to be good leaders, to be great leaders, we must know how to follow and we must know how to lead. But then I had to ask myself, what about the outliers? What about those that say, there's a little something different for me in this lifetime. I have a different lesson. This is so true. I actually looked this up recently. Did you know that in alpha packs of wolves, and here in Wyoming, there's beautiful examples of that. There are some packs where there's not just one leader, but it's the whole community of the wolves. Because they know that one wolf does one thing really well, such as hunting, and the other one does really well at protecting. May you remember that nature is the number one answer that we have to answer many of the questions we keep asking ourselves as human. They have other treasures and other special abilities that we may not understand yet. May we go out in nature and may we observe. And so, as humans, how do we utilize relationships in order to transform and heal? Well, it's the funniest thing. We don't get what we want, ladies. We get what we are. So any single time that I've asked for patience, God gives me a line at the bank. Yeah. Any single time that I've asked for compassion and empathy, I get a difficult moment in my life that is a rock in my shoe, right? It's exactly what you need, even though you don't know that. It's when you're asking for a spoon and the universe, God, source says, here's a fork. Here you go. Let's see how you do with that soup. Let's see how you do with it. And all of you are here today because there's one thing that unites us collectively, and that's leadership. It's knowing that women have power in their specialties and their knowing and in their being. You don't have to hustle to get whatever it is you want in life. You already are. You're already chosen. You're already favored. And so what about relationships is important that most people don't know? Because if there's anything I want to give you today is a golden nugget, right? I've always asked myself in any single space that I am in, if this could have been an email, why am I here? Right? And so if you take this with you today and you pass it on and you gift it to another woman, my work here is done. So here it goes. All right. One of my absolute favorite authors is Dr. Harville Hendrix. Fun fact, he and his wife, Helen, wrote an amazing book, and it's called Getting the Love You Want. Anyone hear about it? Anybody knows? That book has changed my life. I used it not only as a practitioner, I used it with my family, and now I use it with my partner, and so on and so forth. What's the point? Helen and Harvey, they were both divorced. And any of you know in the United States, the chances of a second marriage working out are slim to none. You have 20% chance of it working out, 80% divorce rate for the second rodeo, for the second time around. Because the first time we already know is a little bit over 50%. So how does this impact you? Well, once they got married and they did it a second time with each other, they wrote a book. And here's what they discovered. They discovered that not only are we wounded in relationships, but we also heal in those relationships. So the funniest, ironic thing I could tell you today is that person that really just pushes your button is the exact person that's meant to be in your life to teach you those lessons about yourself in relationship. As humans, we have something so unique and special. As we are wounded in relationship, we also heal in relationship. I could tell you that as a witness. Fun fact, before I retired my licenses, I gave them up, I actually had 10,000 conversations, not by choice because that's what the state required. 3,000 for one license, 3,000 for the other, and so on and so forth. What's the number one thing I learned out of those 10,000 conversations? It's not so much what we share, but what we don't share that matters. What was never told, the untold stories, the untold feelings that stay stuck in our body. The body keeps score. It always does. That scoreboard will never go away. And so the relationship you're in now with yourself is the most important for you to learn. Am I the woman that has a say-do ratio? What does that mean? I say, do, and I do at the same capacity. I tell my girlfriend, I will be there at 10 on the dot. I'm there at 10 on the dot to be of my word, because that is who I am. It's how I show up. It's in the being. Okay? All right. Healing with relationships is the first part. But what are we missing? Which is what I was describing earlier, which is authentic connection. What does that even look like? What's connection? What's authentic? And this plays a big part into the type of individual that we actually are. So fun fact, here's a golden nugget, okay? You can write this down or you can just keep it here. All of us in this room, for the most part, fall into 4 buckets, okay? We either have a secure attachment, I know who I am, I know who they are, and so we are, the collective. And then you have the second type that's anxious. They're just very anxious to be around individuals because they're afraid of being left, they're afraid of not being seen, they're afraid of their needs not being met in that particular way due to childhood or other things, all right? Then we have the third bucket, avoidance. Individuals that avoid those very difficult conversations, the muddy parts, the hard parts. They go off and they don't come back until they feel that it's safe to do so. The most interesting bucket that I have found so far in my work and in my life experience is the fourth category, anxious avoidant, also known as disorganized. I would know. So I had both my parents that were anxious avoidant. Ta-da! And so you got an anxious avoidant baby. And so for the last couple of decades, I've worked on becoming secure in all parts of my life. Now, am I fully there? Of course not. But I'm sharing this with you in vulnerability with courage for you to identify in yourself, how do I show up? What attachment am I feeling in this particular space? With my community, with my beloved, with my children, in my business, and otherwise. We show up differently in each space based on the components. So if you take anything, it's, do I have enough curiosity to explore myself and others in those dynamics? It's a gift we give ourselves. And so then we have to ask ourselves, what's that last piece of the puzzle? And this was it. It was specifically isolation. So a lot of individuals don't know the difference between isolation and solitude. Isolation is this. You can be in a room full of hundreds of people and still feel alone. Solitude is when you are blessed and grateful and you are in awe of yourself because you have the most amazing company with yourself. That's solitude. Solitude is delicious. And here's the thing, coming from a background of an ethnic, very enmeshed, very my business is your business type of unit for a family, I had to learn who I was without the whole. So then I could learn how to be whole and then come back to it and have complete whole people in a community. It's the hardest puzzle piece. It's so hard. It's like looking at the horse and you know it's a horse, but you see the tail, but you don't see the feet. It's such a difficult process to unmuddy. And that's what I'm inviting you to consider. How much of your puzzle have you solved? Is that me or is that my mom? A lot of women will say like, oh, I don't want to repeat those patterns. I don't want to be my mom. But at the end of the day, if we don't look at it, we might be repeating those patterns. And so this is one of the last photos of my father's birthday. And I went to a shop really quick and I bought some mustaches because I feel that one of the most healing things that we can have is humor. And so this is the photo we got here. This is my dad, my mother, my sister, my cousin, my uncle, and myself. And so I keep this dear to my heart to remind myself that humor is indeed a healing component. And that's when you find yourself. You find yourself in the humorous moments. And here's what I always tell individuals, and they're either in awe or they laugh with me. I love comedy, and a lot of people have asked me, who's your favorite comedian? And they're thinking it's like this amazing woman that stands on stage or this man, right? I say, God. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, God's my favorite comedian. We plan, God laughs. That's how it goes. It's a cosmic comedy. Yeah, there we go. And so I had to ask myself, what is this teaching me? Once again, I am a student of life, right? I am a steward of humans healing. So what do I need? And so solitude has taught me more so about connection. And this word has come up a lot today. And in regards to connection, we have to ask ourselves, what does that look like for ourselves, but also for others? Here's the answer I've gotten. It's different for everyone. So it's very much asking you, do you like strawberries or do you like raspberries in your smoothie? How do you like it? Do you like quinoa? Do you like that in your salad? What do you like for lunch? It's the same thing for connection. But here's the hard part. I want you to imagine this before I invite you to something that I've practiced for over a decade. Imagine that every single one of you are a radio, right? Let's imagine that you happen to be country, and she happens to be rock, and she happens to be classical music, right? And I'm over here with the Beatles. We all have a different tune and a different dance. But the most important thing to understand is, how can I invite another person to listen to my song to understand the feelings and the meaning and the context? Well, first and foremost, we have to have clarity. So how do we do that? In meditation. So this is my absolute favorite secret. A lot of people ask me and they say, Z, you've done some pretty amazing things in your life. And I'm like, yeah. They go, how do you do it? And I go, it's not so much about what I'm doing, but what I'm able to hear. And they go, well, what do you mean? And I say, I am a radio station. Source is the radio station. I'm just the conduit, and I'm receiving the message. So if I dial in just enough, I can hear the message. And they go, what? And I go, okay, let me explain this in a better way. God is the cell phone, right? I have another cell phone, and there's text messages in between. But in order for me to receive one, I have to be so still and quiet in order to hear it. That's the key. And they go, okay, well, how do you send a text message? I said, prayer. That's how I send one up, and meditation is how I download what's coming in. And they go, okay, well, how else does it work? Because then they become curious. And I said, well, the healthier my body is, my mind, my spirit, and all of the above, the more in alignment I am with myself to receive that message. I'm an antenna. Every single one of you in this room is an antenna, but you have to ask yourself, what are you receiving? Are you receiving the whole Netflix show with no interruptions? Or are you the 1950s TV with the snowy channel and you're not really sure? Can you hear your own clear voice? You are a channel. You are a portal, ladies. You were chosen. You give life. You can hear a message, 100%. So meditation has helped me do that over the last 10 years. Interestingly enough, a friend of mine in graduate school, a man, was doing transcendental meditation as an experiment, really, but I stuck with it, and he didn't over time, and so he gifted me something so beautiful that I continue to do till this day. This morning I did it, and the day before, and the day before. It's a muscle like anything else. It's like exercising. And I love cooking, so if any of you cook and you're like, okay, I got the best recipe, and I'm gonna make this pie for Christmas, and it's gonna be absolutely delicious. It's the same thing, except the recipe you are creating is indeed yourself. So, what do we get, ladies, when we have meditation and connection? We get identity transformation, because then we have something that's absolutely important, which is transformation. And a lot of people throw this word around. And here's what I'm going to share with you today. Here's what I've learned transformation is. It's actually becoming. It's becoming who you are. You're unlearning everything else, and you're unprogramming yourself. We've always been told all these stories over time, right? Just like Carrie told us, right? The stories, are they serving me still? Is it still my story that I can't do that I'm not capable, that nobody in my family does that? The ladies in this clan don't do that. Does it still serve you? Is it still helping you? And so, who are you becoming? Here's what I've learned. Even though I had training to be a psychotherapist and lead others through that depth of themselves, that's not what taught me to be the person that I am, to allow individuals to heal in that sacred space. The one thing that I got really good at was asking questions, asking deep questions. take this, ladies. This one's a golden nugget, all right? The quality of your questions will determine the quality of your life. Let that soak in. The quality of your questions will determine the quality of your life. Years ago, when I was dating, I used to ask so are you married? That's not the question. The question I learned to ask is there anyone special, deeply important that you respect in your life that would be bothered by this happening? I got different answers, right? So that's a great example of the better quality questions you ask, the deeper the quality of the responses that you will get from individuals, from experiences, but also source. Ask the right questions. It's not who should I be, who am I already? Please help me remember. And so we have to ask ourselves, in this whole process, in this whole shenanigans we call life, who do we become? Who are we? It's the deepest question we can ask. It's like, who are you, right? Who am I? And we can ponder on it over and over and over, but in the being, in the doing, in the exchange with relationships, in the exchange we have with ourselves, in the process of actually doing something that's really difficult. Maybe it's climbing a mountain, maybe it's writing a book. Maybe for some of you, it's just raising your first child and trying to juggle every other part of you as a woman in that transition. May you learn who you are. And so the other really important part of this puzzle piece that I have learned in leading ourselves, she who leads herself, is what do we value? If you can understand your values, and they do change, ladies, they do shift, you can understand more of why things aren't working. I can't tell you how many times in business, in relationships, and in friendships, things weren't working out, but I didn't understand why. And I'm like, oh, they don't value communication. They don't value growth. Oh, they don't value accountability. No wonder this feels like pulling teeth. Then I was like, okay, so then here's the thing. I'm not the issue. They're not the issue. We just don't align. So funny, but the idea came to me when I actually went to a mechanic. And the mechanic said, look, this bar thing here. And I was like, okay. They're like, it's not aligned. And I was like, whoa, that's my friendships. That's the man I'm dating. This is my family. I outgrew my family, right? And I hear a lot of aha moments because it's the same thing. We're just one of the most complex beings that there are, humans. Okay? So now we have to ask ourselves and invite ourselves to who do we become to become the woman that leads herself. If I lead myself, I am no longer giving away my power to someone else. And I want to be clear that in a mentorship-mentee relationship, it's one of the most beautiful relationships you can have. And for many of you that have experienced momentum, you know this. There's a big difference between mentorship and advice, okay? When you are looking for advice, somebody else is doing this to your power. But when someone is mentoring you, they are co-collaborating with you. They are co-creating and finding that with you. That's why there's no I'm here, you're there. It's can we do this together, this song and dance? And that's exactly why we're here. We are co-creating new realities in this room. And so who do you want to become? Okay? Do you want to become the woman who leads herself, or do you want to stay the woman that gives away her power? And so here's the invitation for today, and I love this. I love every time that I share this because it's an open invitation. It's not something you shove down someone's throat, and it's not something you say, oh, okay, I'll see you on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. It's an open invitation because it's always there for you. It's a movement, and that's why I repeat, we are here today to do. This is a movement for women who know exactly what their worth is. They will not settle for less, okay? They are unafraid to lead. They are led by faith versus fear, and who continue to rise together. This is the most important point, ladies, because that's exactly why we're here today, right? For us to be in unity, support one another, understand what our purpose is, our mission, our values. and the movement we want to be a part of. Nike said, just do it. And a lot of people said, heck yeah, I'll move with that movement. So you want to ask yourself that in your lifetime, what is the movement you want to make for yourself and for others? Okay? And so lastly, we need to ask ourselves, what is all this telling us? This is telling us that we rise together. That we rise together as women, and this is exactly what empowered me to say with an absolute whole body yes to speaking to these women today. Because when we rise together, ladies, we can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeahlot, for that powerful message. Friends, Zeahlot is always looking for new opportunities to inspire and empower audiences worldwide. If your organization or someone you know could benefit from her speaking or business expertise, please connect with her after this event. She is eager to continue making an impact in the world with her wisdom and insight. And you can connect with her on https://zeahlot.com. Thank you again, Zeahlot. Okay, we are nearing the end of our event, but we wanted to give our audience an opportunity to interact with these amazing speakers a little bit. So I would like to now invite Carrie, Patty, and Zeahlot back up to the stage for a little Q&A. And we will also have the famous catch box that the center provides. So you can ask the question. Elizabeth is happy to circulate that around the crowd as well. But we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks, ladies. I'm happy to kick things off too. It's always fun to hear our speakers interacting with one another though, and that's something that Momentum very purposely creates as part of this experience. We've had the pleasure of dining with one another. That's also key to the Momentum experience. It's part of our mentoring program. We have these small group dinners. It's pretty amazing, some of the conversations that come out of that. So I might just turn it to you ladies first to see how you've inspired each other and what are some takeaways that you have from your time together.
I'm just always inspired. I read Carrie's book, and I read it twice, and it really helped me not only cultivate more of the woman that I am becoming and leading other women, but my presentation. Because it was so funny, but I was reading your book, and I was like, this woman knows a lot. She knows a lot, and I love that I'm inspired, and I love books. I've always loved those. So, Carrie, thank you. Thank you for writing that book and having the courage to do it. Oh, and Patti, man, I remember learning that you had climbed Mount Everest, and I was like, whoa, I had no idea that women that were same models, right, different series, could do that, because I've always been in this small, tiny body, and when I go to the grocery store and I'm reaching for that, I'm like, oh, I can't reach it. I feel some kind of way. The world has always been bigger than I am. And then you come into my life and show me, no, honey, anything's possible. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am really overwhelmed with how much our messages seem to resonate and echo and intersect one another, and some of the themes that have come through with connecting to a world community and generationally, and just thinking about the power of that energy, which is sometimes hard to describe, and I'm not often in spaces where those conversations are happening. So I thank both of you for those conversations and your individual approach to what seems to be very common interests.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, for me, I love it. I love the possibility to meet the two of you here. I learn a lot. I enjoy to write in notebook. I realize a couple of things about myself, about my history, about you, Zeahlot. It's incredible. It's incredible. The small details, like yesterday where we sharing how to take picture with the best way to take pictures, things like that, because I'm super bad with the iPhone or with the phone in general, so small details. I was not very well with my stomach when I arrived here. You give me some tips also. So just one more time realize we have so many things in common. We can live and rise in different parts of the country or the world. You have so many things in common. So I really enjoy this day with you.
Thank you. Carrie, I loved your exercise about what we were going to discard and throw away and what we were going to ask for in life. So I would just ask you ladies the question, what are you asking for? And I'm happy to share. Mine is recognition. You know, it's nice to actually work hard and say, I deserve to be recognized for this. And that doesn't have to be an egotistical thing. So I'm curious for each of you, if you could say one thing you're asking for in this moment, what is that?
Okay, in that moment I said empathy, but I think it's not really empathy. In that moment when I don't know what doesn't mean empathy, but I think what I'm really looking for, because I think I have empathy. So what I'm really looking for, I think is, how can I say, more community. I don't know if you understand, to spend more time with people, not too much work, just to have nice conversation, more community, to create more community around me. That's what I'm looking for, more than empathy.
I would always say it's connection. When we find it, it's so delicious. Sometimes I ask myself, how did I get so lucky to connect with this person and hear this exact message at this time? So it's always been connection, and I always look for it. And I'm grateful when I have it.
You know, earlier I said respect, and that's kind of a general, but I think today, listening, and listening to a point of understanding.
To clarify, Carrie, does that mean you want to be heard or you're trying to cultivate listening yourself?
Both. Deeper listening on my end, but also asking for deeper listening and the opportunity to be listened to. Yeah.
And just to validate too, when I was holding one of the bends out there, I heard respect a lot. And I'm like, oh, that's why there's a song, R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I love that women are asking for that. Well, I think it would be fun to turn the questions to the audience, and hopefully our catch box is out there. So if you would boldly raise your hand, do your power move, and ask your question, we would love to hear our speakers' responses.
I just want to thank all three of you, actually everyone that's here, for a fantastic day. So you were talking about, Z, you were talking about asking the best questions. And I know meditation, it's like a muscle, and I'm assuming that there's a technique or some way to dive in and get real and ask better questions. So I'd just like for you to share how to go about asking those better questions.
Thank you so much for that question. Here's what I've learned in the decade that I've meditated. It's different for everyone. My body has actually given me more questions and answers than this or this. And there's the logical, then there's the felt, like Carrie was explaining earlier, the visceral values that we have. When you're quiet enough, you'll get to hear the whispers that if you don't listen to it whisper, it will become a scream. And that comes from native wisdom. There is a saying that says if you don't hear the whispers, they will become screams. So my answer is just listen, and then you'll hear it. You'll hear the questions and the answers.
Shout out to Andy for asking the question about how to ask better questions. Well played. Anyone else? In the back.
Sorry, mine was like for Patty yesterday, but I did not get the chance to ask her. You did something extraordinary, and sometimes people have to leave something or someone behind. What did you leave behind, and how did you overcome that?
Time with my family. That was the hard part to leave behind. That is your question, if I understand well. But that's the reason maybe now I spending a lot of time with my family. I really appreciate my family support me. I disappear because they understood that was my mission. Or I was happy to doing that. That is super important for me, to feel that my family support me and understood that I need to go outside and live my own life. Now I'm back. I'm super, super happy to have that opportunity, but it was hard at the beginning.
I have a question for Carrie. What are the tools that you use to train intuition?
Oh.
It's a good one.
Yeah, very. I think meditation is a fantastic tool. I think journaling is a fantastic tool. There are lots of different options out there depending on your personality for getting into touch, because also going for a hike in the woods or a mountain, spending time with yourself. But I think probably for me, the basis of that is figuring out a way to turn off the outside voices. Even if you want to return to them later, but to really figure out what is coming from you and what has been coming from outside sources. And some of that takes actually trying to trace back, I believe this. Okay, well, where is that coming from? What is the source of that information, whether it's from generational teachings or cultural or societal, and then spending enough time with yourself that you are in touch with your body, because I do believe, I think all of us here believe that your body sends you signals. It can keep you out of danger, right? When you are in a situation of extremes, safety precautions, heart and mind precautions. So yeah, that would be my answer, to try to really put yourself in a place and a state of mind where you can kind of quiet that outside influence.
I have a question. I loved Z's story about the woman that you met in the airport and her describing Jackson as wild. So tell me, each of you fabulous speakers, what does being wild mean to you?
I'm in my underwear. I'm by myself, bra and panties, and I'm snacking on probably what I shouldn't. And I'm watching the show I probably shouldn't, because I have 20 million other things to complete, not to finish, to complete. And I just feel wild doing that. And my hair's a mess. I'm not wearing any makeup. I don't know. I just feel like I'm ready to run through the forest, but I'm running through my living room. That's wild to me. Yeah. Yeah. Modern wild.
So I actually talk a little bit about wild in Origin Story because Glennon Doyle's book Untamed really inspired me. I listened to it during the pandemic when I was locked in my apartment for 7 weeks in Madrid. And so when I hear wild, I think of the cheetah and the dirty pink bunny. And if you haven't read it, I suggest it's in the opening of her book that you take a listen, because that wild of being young and uninhibited and in a convertible driving wherever, and the wind going through your hair, and then learning somewhere along the way that that's not ladylike, or it's not appropriate, or that, you know, convertibles are dangerous. Yeah, I'm in the process of reclaiming that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if I understand why I translate in Spanish, so I'm not 100% sure, but what I understand for why, for me, is somebody who breaking rules, he follow your heart. That's my feeling about why. Follow your heart. That's it.
Getting back to nature.
Yes.
Wild is our birthright, right? Any other questions from the audience? Yes, I see one in the back there.
This is wild. I was wondering how you pick yourself back up after a big obstacle or setback, like a big injury right before you're going on a mountaineering expedition, or maybe you give a presentation that's a flop. I can't imagine that actually happening, but I can't imagine. I mean, my biggest setbacks have been physical for the most part, but I know there's a lot of emotional setbacks. How do you pick yourself back up?
That question is just for me.
Is that for everyone?
Yeah.
Open question.
No, please.
For me, it's not so much of how I pick myself back up, but how many times I pick myself back up. Yeah, I remember hearing the ancient proverb, this Chinese, it says, fall 7, get back up 8. And I was like, whoa, so the ratio is just get back up more than I fall? And I'm like, okay, I got it. Yeah. How?
How do you get back out there? Like sometimes after something terrible happens in the world or in the community or personally, and I just want to stay home for a week. Like, how do you get back out there?
Personally, when I've had soul-crushing moments in my life, and I've had a good amount of them, hence the growth that Source is giving me, it's literally been asking myself, is this happening to me or for me? It's the mindset, number 1. And then 2, giving myself the space and the capacity to actually feel what I'm feeling. And then once I feel it, I can make sense of it to my own self. So more so, it's aligning my chakras. So I start here first in the logical, then I move into my heart, and then it's like I was explaining to one of the women today earlier, then I can have a full cycle. And when I have a full cycle, then I'm like, all right, I can own my story. Nobody can drag me through it. And I show the world I got back up. That's my process.
I think for me, self-care really comes into play in figuring out and knowing yourself and allowing yourself that grieving process, because we have expectations. And then understanding, I think the more clear you can be about that purpose or that why or that community, trying to take the focus off of yourself and onto the audience, the problem that you're trying to solve, the why that you have, that you know is greater than your individual pain or suffering in that moment. Because for me, it usually comes back to there are other reasons why I need to keep going. Whether it's my children or thinking about helping other people, changing hearts and minds with storytelling, but that focus on the greater purpose is very helpful to me.
Yeah, me too. I think in general I'm a very positive person, so I focus in the things I can do, in things I can change, not in things I can not do anything. Because if I focus in the other one, there's nothing too much I can do, so I prefer to focus in the thing I can do if I keep going in that direction. That's what I do normally.
Guys.
Good catch.
Now we're getting wild.
Thank you to all of you. My question is for everyone and has to do with authenticity. I think all three of you ladies are very unique, and it was very clear to see how you found authenticity, and it really has guided you in your lives, right? And I'm curious if you can share a bit more about finding that authenticity, staying true to that authenticity amongst, expectations of other people, yourself, society, and how to stay true to that authenticity.
Well, okay. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know if I think I have been all my life like me. Just maybe I learned very early just to be myself. I don't know how to explain how to do it, because I think I learned that very early in my life. Maybe because I saw so many people, maybe how I mentioned yesterday, because I start to climb mountain, I can see after 2, 3, 4 days, everybody cannot keep going with phases, everything change, everything fall apart. Maybe I learned very early to be just myself. Yeah, so I have been myself. Like I'm here now talking with you, I'm everywhere. So I don't know how to teach how to do that. I don't know if you understand. Sorry, it's difficult for me, that question, because I think I have been all my life myself. I don't pay too much attention what people expect about me. It's what I want to be. That's what I hear myself.
I think for me, I've had a couple of conversations recently about integrity. And it comes, what I realized is that if I'm clear about my values and my boundaries, then I am less conflicted about being my own authentic self. And that prevents me from then having conflicts or feeling bad or making decisions that I regret in the future, because I've clarified that. And I know in order to feel good about my actions, I need to kind of stick to that plan and not be influenced too much by some kind of arbitrary rules that have been made up and not re-examined or interrogated in decades or centuries, right? So, yeah.
This is what hit me the most. One of my favorite authors is Don Miguel Ruiz, and he's the author of The 4 Agreements. And there's this other really amazing book he wrote called The Mastery of Love. And there's a chapter in the book, The Mastery of Love, and it talks about domestication. And I remember reading it, and it was like an epiphany where I was like, whoa, that's exactly what I felt, but I didn't know how to say, so kudos, thank you, he said it already. And what he said in the book was the following. He said, imagine a world where it's not only animals that are domesticated, but humans. And I was like, whoa, what does he mean? Then he gives an example of a little girl that starts to sing, and her mother says, quiet, 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 that's not good singing. And then she becomes domesticated, and she gets the program inserted. Here's how you need to be here in this space with these people that love you. And I remember feeling like that little girl in that very moment in the book. And I was like, whoa, those are all the things I've had to unlearn. And so my answer is I'm trying my darnest to be as authentic as I can, and the world keeps testing me. And that's the point. And that's why I laugh, because I could sit here and tell all of you ladies like, oh, I practice all that. Yes, I do, but every day I am tested more than I know. All I know is I know nothing. Yeah.
This question is for Z. A core value of mine is mental and emotional health. And what advice would you give to nurturing being a safe space and encouraging people to share with you, I guess?
The number one thing I have learned is if you want light, you got to be the light first. Mahatma Gandhi said it best. If you want to change the world, start with yourself first. And so every time I was met with an unsafe space, I had to ask myself first, what about this did I not like, and what am I contributing to this? And then if I caught myself saying, oh no, I'm not contributing anything, that's the problem. You're not speaking up for yourself in that moment. And so in me learning that and then acting it out and then becoming that role model, other people were like, whoa, that's what that feels like? Is that what you just did right now, that you held space? And I'm like, uh-huh. They're like, that's the difference between sympathy and empathy, feeling for versus feeling with. I was like, yes. And so my answer to that is we're very blessed and we're very grateful when we have that experience, but I've learned that to cultivate it first will provide the pollen and the seeds so that others can see it and model it with me.
And how do you do that without oversharing, I guess? Or about sharing your experiences?
I think it's a good balance. It's also knowing when to go and when to stop. So it's becoming so attentive and in tune to where when someone speaks, it's so funny, but I actually listen for what they're not saying. So I listen for the whispers before they become screams. And it's a practice, it's a muscle like any other. Even when I'm in a conversation when I'm like, all right, okay, grandma, like 40 minutes in, like let's change the tune here. I still need to ask myself, what is it important that she is sharing in this moment? Patience.
Thank you.
Okay, last call for questions. Is everybody ready? Oh, there we go.
Right in the middle. Do it.
She can do it. Be wild.
That was some teamwork.
Thank you all so much. So many great messages. And the question that has just been in my heart right now is for Z, and I'm curious about the meditation practice and what that looks like, morning, how long, is there a pattern? Just curious as I explore this for myself.
I'm not a runner, but my partner is, and so I've found similarities. When I first started, I could only do 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, I'm done, I can't do this. And then I pushed myself a little bit, and then it was 10 minutes, and then 30 minutes, and then by the time I knew it, it was an hour. Here's what really pushed me. Unsolicited, but a gift from above, I met someone that told me, hey, do you know what a vipanatsa is? And I'm like, no. And they're like, it's where you sit for 10 days, and you don't eat anything, and you just sit with yourself. I was like, whoa. So then that took my meditation to a whole other level, and I'm sharing this with you because even after that experience, I still struggle. And so now what I do is I have to have the right mindset, and here's my standard, because the expectation's external and the standard's internal. Before I consume, I create. And I cannot create if I don't hear my voice first, so it's not imprinted by anything else. And so the first voice that comes in, it's when we're sleeping. It's the dream. And if we're not dreaming, it's what's not speaking there. So whatever I didn't dream comes out in meditation. So when I wake up, it's the first thing that I do. And I'll sit there, and a lot of times if I haven't gone to the bathroom or if my body's uncomfortable, it'll take a while to get into it. But once I do, it's literally like a faucet of water that turns on, and I get all kinds of things, wild things, normal things, forgot to turn off blank kitchen knob, but then I get $1 million ideas too. And so the answer is the discipline of doing it, number one, knowing why you're doing it, and just knowing that some days you're going to struggle and some days you're going to be the Olympic medalist of what you're doing. It's just, am I committed to this process of meeting myself deeper every day?
Thank you.
The quality of your questions, ladies.
The quality of the questions might be dictated by the time on Friday as well. So. Does anybody else have a burning question they would like to ask our speakers? Okay, well, we can take that as a sign that we have done our job here today. Please join me in thanking all of these wonderful ladies for sharing their time with us. Thank you.